No. Anytime now. You want to go over there we go. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where my good friend Dr. Zayas God, he's grimacing. Can you not hear me again?
No, I hear you. The video was recording for like 10 seconds though before you started.
Oh, all right. Well, that's hot. People love technical difficulties when they're listening to something. So what do you call it? We are recording two videos today. This is the first of two. We are recording a review of Life of Chuck, directed by Mike Flanagan, and then we are recording 28 years later, directed by Danny Boyle. And Danny, I am guessing that you and I are going to be flipped on this. I think that there's one movie that you probably liked a lot more than me, and there's probably one movie that I liked a lot more than you. Can you guess which one's which?
Well, based on that, I'm gonna say it's rather obvious. Yeah. Uh, so here's my question. Since we're starting with Life of Chuck, did
Yes.
you did you read the story?
Yes.
Okay. So as with a lot of Stephen King, Mike Flanagan, Stephen King adaptations, I read the story. I actually read it twice, and
Sure.
I just sat going, "How the hell is he going to make this a movie?"
Right.
And in the weirdest thing that you can do, I guess, he literally
Yeah.
just almost did a page for page adaptation
Correct.
of the story. And
Right.
having just reread the book, the story, because it's a short novella in the compilation "If It Bleeds" by Stephen King.
Right.
Uh, First of all, it is maybe the least Stephen King story imaginable. There's elements of science fiction. There's
Right.
a hint. There's this like through line in the story that they do a good job of in the movie of like
Yeah.
hinting at some supernatural. I don't even want to say a force, just like something supernatural that exists in this cupola of their house, this like upstairs locked room. Um, and aside from that, it's just a very straightforward story about
Mm-hmm.
an absolutely ordinary guy and the life that he lives and the people that cross paths with him who
Right.
may not even know him or may know him as just a guy in passing, and the way that you affect the people around you in your life. And it's very, very much not what you would expect from Stephen King, but I think it
Mm.
ended up being almost exactly what I expect from Mike Flanagan, in that it's incredibly poignant, incredibly heartwarming,
Yeah.
makes you sad in the best ways. Incredibly well acted. You
Yeah.
get obviously his entire the Flavengers are all there in small roles. So
Right. Right.
yeah, I totally understand, and a criticism that I've heard of the movie,
Yeah.
and maybe you share this criticism, is that it just it aside, if you've read the story, other than what is literally in the pages of Stephen King's 50-page story, there's really not much else there.
Right.
Um, but I also kind of feel like every once in a while you need a movie like this in the world that we're currently living in.
Right.
For a movie about a 39-year-old guy who's younger than us, who dies of
Yeah.
who is dying of cancer, and that's not a
Right.
spoiler, by the way. You find that out very early on.
Right.
uh it's it's an incredibly positive movie, and I walked out of it with like tears in my eyes, but not because I was like sad. I walked out of it with tears in my eyes because yeah, I did like get emotional at some of the parts, but also like it felt like this is the kind of movie we actually need right now. And of course, like I know it didn't do very well at the box office. A movie like this never really was going to do very well at the box office.
Right.
But I feel like this is a movie that, and this could literally apply to almost any Flanagan movie.
Okay.
Because I think where Flanagan is universally accepted in the world of pop culture is the Netflix streaming shows.
Right.
Everybody, you don't have to have a horror podcast channel called the Lassercast to
Right.
appreciate The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, the Fall of the House of Usher, Midnight Club, etc. Where a lot of his movies, though, even his best work, like Doctor Sleep, did not get, despite all the critical acclaim it got, it did not draw an audience in the theater. And I
Right.
think that when it comes to Flanagan as a filmmaker, as opposed to a TV series or a streaming series creator, I feel like his movies are going to be appreciated over the long run as like cult classics. Like, they're going to make lists of like, why didn't people see this movie in theaters?
Right.
And
Right.
and I feel like Life of Chuck is destined to be another one of those where it would not shock me if this got an Oscar nomination or two. And I kind of walked out of it thinking, like, is this going to be the movie that Mike Flanagan gets like recognized at award season for? Because it's so far removed from the pure horror that he does. Like we always talk about the drama and the characters in his works, but they're still horror. Like it, Doctor Sleep, Ouija, Origin of Evil, Hush. This is
Right.
not a horror movie at all, and it's
No.
not like under no. We can't even like pretend. Oh well, it's based on a Stephen King, and there might be a
Yeah.
ghost somewhere. This isn't a horror story at all. It's
Yeah.
and and I think that maybe this is the movie that he'll get mainstream recognition for. But I also can see where I'm interested to hear your take. I've been talking for 7.5 minutes, so
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
you've been eating a bowl of cereal, and I've been talking for 7.5 minutes. This is basically our YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's pancakes and bacon, but yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. No. No. I know. Like, here's the thing, right? The channel's called the Lassercast. We started out reviewing Mike Flanagan right off the bat, and we love him. We've given him so much praise. But one thing I've kind of decided with our YouTube channel, just in general, is I'm going to be honest with my reviews, and I'm not going to like kind of sugarcoat things just because I might know a person. Like when we reviewed Black Phone, I really like C. Robert Cargill. I've met him a couple of times in real life, and I wasn't that impressed with the Black Phone. And Danny, if you could just rattle that icy cup a little bit more while I talk, that would be really great. Thank you so much. No, no. I kind of feel the same way about this movie as I did about the Black Phone, where I think it's good. I could absolutely understand why people like it, but there's just something kind of missing from it that makes me like really excited about it or feel like super connected to it. And there's a lot of Flanagan stuff that we've covered, and there's a difference between the TV shows, the streaming shows, and the movies, like you just said, which I think is a key point there. But there are streaming shows that I wasn't really into. I didn't finish Bly Manor, and I'm the co-host of the Lastercast, right? I didn't finish Midnight Club, and I'm the co-host of the Lastercast. But I think Midnight Mass is one of the best things on Netflix. I think Hill House is amazing. Doctor Sleep is like one of my favorite Stephen King adaptations, if not my favorite. So this movie kind of falls into that category as well. I think that once you know what the idea is behind it, it kind of just becomes you're just kind of waiting for the circle to be complete. Like you're like, oh, okay, I get the premise, and now we get to this. And so, just kind of bringing it back to our discussion, when we found out that this was going to be a movie, we found this out a while ago, like maybe like 2 years ago, that this was going to be a movie, and we listened to the recording of it on audiobook, and I just remember like hearing this and thinking like, why is he choosing this story? And you already kind of mentioned that in the beginning of the review, too, of like, how could you make this into a movie? My question is, he obviously has a close relationship with Stephen King at this point. He could pick what he wants to adapt. Why did he pick this particular story? And I wonder, is it because it's something that allows itself to put in such a big cast? Because at this point, he has like this fucking army of people that he can put into his movies, you know?
So I saw this at Alamo 2
Yeah.
weeks before it came out. If you've not seen the movie, if you want just like a spoiler-free 45-second short, I put that up weeks ago. And part of that was there was a live stream Q&A with Mike Flanagan. It was hosted by Eric Vespi of the Kingcast. And actually, him and the late Scott Wampler have cameos in this movie. You can see them in the background.
Oh shit.
You can see them in the background while Tom Hiddleston is, I believe, sitting on a bench eating an ice cream. I'm not sure. And the question why this story came
Yeah.
up. That's the obvious
Right.
question because it's a hard translation. It's an odd story when you're listening to it or when you're reading it because if you've not read the story, if you don't know what the life of Chuck is, very quickly, it's 3 chapters. Chapter 1 is a wild science fiction, almost apocalyptic story of an English teacher and his ex-wife as basically the world is ending.
Right.
Like apocalyptic events are happening. California has broken off of the West Coast. The internet is down. Very namely, Pornhub is also down.
I know. That's horrible.
That's a big part of the movie, which I thought that was hysterical. That was David Desmalkian, right? That was
Correct.
that was great.
Hmm.
And I'll never get his name right. Chiwetel Ejiofor, Oscar nominee from 12 Years a Slave. He's fantastic. He plays this English teacher as the world is basically coming to an end. And all around them, as the world is ending, you see these banners, these placards, these messages in the sky. Thanks, Chuck, for 39 wonderful years. And you're like,
Right.
who is Chuck? What the fuck is going on? And then chapter 2, we meet 39-year-old Chuck, played by Tom
Right.
Hiddleston, who is just your average, boring banker. He just happens to have a day where he's on a business trip and he sees a busking drummer and he just decides to dance. And he ends
Right.
up involving a young woman in the dance, and it becomes this like everyone in the town comes to watch this guy dancing for a busking drummer. And you're
Right.
like, again, you're reading this and you're going, what is this story? And the
Right.
final chapter is young Chuck growing up with his Jewish grandparents, who, his parents die tragically, and you find out everything about why he loves to dance and just who he is as a kid. And that's it. It's basically, like you said, you're kind of waiting for this full circle moment of
Yeah.
Chuck is just a guy. He lived a life. He did some stuff. And when he died, the universe around him dies also. And you don't realize the effect that like small characters have. And in the third
Right.
act, which is the chapter one working backwards, you find out that you kind of meet all the characters from the beginning, are present throughout. And I don't know, to your point, you said you really couldn't like identify with the movie, and I feel
Yeah.
like maybe that's why I enjoyed it more. And like, he calls his grandmother Bubby. Like, I'm Jewish, I had a Bubby.
Yeah.
And and like, I remember growing up with my Bubby, and my grandfather died way before I was born on one side, and my other grandfather died when I was very young. But my friends called their grandfathers Zadie. And the idea of like, there was the idea of like, losing people close to you. I know that's not like a significant, everybody's gone through loss, but it parts
Right.
of the movie just connected with me a lot more. I'll give you a
Yeah.
perfect example. When I was rereading this, and by rereading this, I was listening to it on Audible. I was on
Right.
the bus. I was on the bus on the way to work,
Right.
and I was like tearing up on the bus, like just
Right.
listening to the story while I'm on my way to work. And I was like tearing up on the bus, and I was like, people are gonna think I'm fucking crazy because I'm in South Brooklyn, like crying on a bus.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think the story just impacted me a lot more. Like, I've been, since my dad passed, I've had like been going through like my own existential crisis of
Sure.
like what does life mean, and would I rather like, you know would I rather, this is a fucking horrible discussion to have, but like, would I rather like die slowly of like painful cancer, or would I rather just, 1 minute I'm there, 1 minute I'm not, and my family just has to cope with the loss that way. And
Yeah.
so this story really kind of, it brought a lot of those feelings back for me in a way that, and the way Flanagan tells a story. And you brought up the cast and like how many roles there are in this movie, and it's wild. It's like all of the people from Flanagan's movies, all the people
Right.
from his streaming shows, they're there for whether
Right.
it's a one scene. Sometimes they're off screen and it's just voice acting. Uh,
Right.
but then it's like, oh, here's Mark Hamill. Here's Mia Sara coming back to acting for the first time in like decades. Here's the first time he's worked with Tom Hiddleston. Ejiofor, Matthew Lillard. It's like all of these amazing actors just kind of show up and I think that is a testament to what it's like to work with Mike Flanagan. You have like all of these great actors are like, I'll come on for uh 40 seconds of screen time. Like,
Right. Right.
yeah. And I don't know. I feel like at this point, there's a comfort level for me when I see those people in a Mike Flanagan project. Like Heather
Right.
Langenkamp. Heather Langenkamp
Right.
shows up for like literally, again, it's a couple lines of dialogue. If you're not a diehard horror movie fan, she's just an actress who's on the screen. But for us, it's like, oh my god, yeah, oh, and like
Right.
I'm elbowing Athena in the theater. I'm like, look, it's Heather
Right.
Langenkamp, and it's like
Right.
I get so much joy out of that as a Flanagan fan, and as a film watcher, like watching horror movie stars like get to cross over into like a mainstream, like like a pretty significant movie. And it yeah, I just kind of, I don't know, I feel like this movie did connect with me on those levels, and I think that's why I enjoyed it the way I did. Like
Yes.
I said in my short review, this for me, after the first viewing, it felt like this is going to be for me on that Mount Rushmore of like non horror Stephen King adaptations. So it's going to be like Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me, The Green Mile, and then Life of Chuck, maybe a distant fourth in that like group of movies.
Yes.
Because like there
Yes.
are the non-horror Stephen King, there's not a lot of it. Like he's
Yeah.
capable of it, but there's not a lot of those non-horror adaptations. And I felt like this is definitely one of the better ones, and probably the best one we've seen since Green Mile.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna make a pretty mean joke about Mount Rushmore in this movie because I kind of don't feel like it's like you said, very distant cousin or whatever of those movies. That's kind of the way I feel. Like if you compare this to like Stand By Me and Shawshank Redemption, this is like it's weird because I took my daughter Pepper to go see this movie, and she's actually watching Stand By Me with my other daughter Clementine. They just finished it last night, and Pepper was like, "Oh my God, Stand By Me!" Like compared to this, like she didn't really like this movie, and maybe that tempered my viewing of it. However, what I would say is that, man, you bring up so many points. Like I got to try to get every single one. But I think the thing for me, right, is that Stephen King is a pantser. He's really famous for being a pantser. Pantser, I think I mentioned this on the show before, but pantser is basically you're writing from the seat of your pants. You sit down at the keyboard, the story comes out of you. You're not outlining it, you're not planning it. There's different types of writers. There's planners and pantsers. He's famous for just writing and seeing where the story takes it. And I feel like this story, which Mike Flanagan adapted faithfully, it's like when you're, I know this from experience, when you're writing, if you get kind of stuck or bored, or if like you end a part and you're like, well, where do I go next? Sometimes you'll just randomly jump in time, randomly add a character just to kind of spice things up and make it interesting. So like I think that he did this kind of sequence where the world is dying, and that in itself could have been a short story, a very short story. And he's like, well, where do I go next? How do I explain this Chuck guy? And then he had this idea for this crazy scene where this guy just starts dancing with this random girl on the street, you know? And then probably by the third act, it's like, well, I have to kind of tie this all together. I've made it two separate stories. I have to somehow add a third act to kind of tie it all together and make it make sense. And the third act is a lot of explaining why the dancing part is so important to Chuck, right? That's what a lot of the third act is. Now, one other thing I just want to bring up too is like you were saying, well, maybe you have a stronger kind of emotional connection to it, and I think you absolutely do in terms of like loss and stuff. But for me, both of my mom's parents both died of pancreatic cancer, right? And there's this one line in this movie where he says something along the lines of, in 9 months, he will enter a world of pain where he won't understand why God would even have created anything or something like that, or like why God could even create life in the first place. Like he's talking about basically how severely painful cancer can be. And watching from in person with my grandfather, but then from a distance, my grandmother died of pancreatic cancer. It just looks like the worst fucking thing that could ever happen to a person ever. And they just become a husk of a person, whimpering in pain as they just lose themselves, right? And that's what happens to Chuck. So it did have significance. And then the other thing is when Chuck is with his grandmother and she dances with him. My grandma didn't dance like that, but she kind of was the person that raised me while my mom and dad went to work. So I'm not an orphan, but I was with my grandma a lot, the way that he's with his grandparents a lot. And the way her hair was, the grandmother, where like her hair is kind of dark on the sides and light on the top, and she kind of was more fun and youthful than the grandfather. I totally related to that too. Like there's parts of this movie that I like significantly. I teared up multiple times, but then it's like Pepper said, she felt like it could be edited. And I think that what Flanagan's strength is that he adapts Stephen King directly and like faithfully. It's like so respectful to the way that he adapts Stephen King. I think with this movie, though, it actually could benefit from going away from Stephen King and being its own thing. Because last thing, Danny, and then I'm going to shut up, is that, like, you know me, where it's like I hate when things are explained versus shown. And Flanagan's thing is that he has a lot of sequences in anything, movies or TV or streaming shows, where like characters kind of come in and tell a story, or they have a monologue, and that's a lot of this movie. And there's not a lot of like actual action. Action is a stupid term to use, but like things that happen, like where you're watching a scene and it's not just a person talking at a person. It's like, okay, well, they're doing this, and Chuck is uncomfortable because he's in this scenario. Like the most action we have in this movie, where something happens versus someone telling you it's happening, is the fucking dance sequence. Otherwise, it's like a lot of people just being like, well, this is what Carl Sagan says about time, and this is what, and it's just, I don't know. I feel like it didn't grab me. Okay, I'm done.
I don't think that's a unpopular, because I don't think it grabbed Athena that way either. Like she was like, yeah, it was good, and that was the end of like our discussion about them. Like she was like, it was good, yeah, I liked it,
Yeah,
and I was like,
yeah,
okay, good, and then like we walked out and we went to a bookstore and we went to the and we hopped back on the train, and like I don't know, I feel like I saw the movie 2.5 weeks ago, and I've been dying to get back to see it again, and I feel like it's really hard sometimes to like have an in-depth conversation about like a movie that you saw one time, and
sure.
then like you bring up Stand By Me, and it's like Stand By Me came out in 1986. Like I there's parts of that movie I memorize,
Right.
and I'm sure now that Pepper has seen it, she's gonna rewatch it over and over again. Um, and I do kind of feel like this is a movie that, upon the first viewing, for some people is just. I feel like this is a movie, and I think you're kind of saying it without saying it, that could be boring for some people, because there isn't
Yeah.
a lot. There isn't a lot, especially after that first part, where you're
Right.
like, oh, what kind of movie am I watching? California is falling off, the internet is gone, the world is ending. What the hell's going on here? Once you kind
Right.
of put together the message behind that and how it has to do with Chuck, and then you spend the next hour of the movie watching Chuck, at various stages of his life, dancing and learning to dance, you're like, oh, okay. I I totally get where, like, again, coming from what Flanagan's done in the past, what Stephen King has written in the past, there's a reason why it was considered like an unadaptable story.
Right. Right.
Uh, Flanagan did say in the live stream Q&A that he had just come out of, I think he had read this just coming out of COVID. And,
Oh, okay. Okay.
and, and I think a lot of his motivation and a lot of what drew him to this
Hmm.
was like the idea of like, well, here's a story where like the world is literally ending, and it has to do with, one fairly insignificant person, and we've just come out of like a global pandemic where so many people died and we've been cut off from human contact, and
Right.
the idea of like what human contact means, like
Right.
how Chuck is affected by his grandmother, by the conversations with his grandfather, by his teacher. First of all, I love that he cast Samantha Slayan as a non villainous character. She's
Yes.
like the happy dance teacher who motivates him, and I'm like,
Right.
yay! I'm so happy for her that she got this role. Now she's gonna get to play checks notes. Margaret White. Fuck.
Right. 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 No, okay, oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, more.
Well, no, because so I sent you a video before we started recording, and Eric Vespi like gave Flanagan a chance to just kind of like, his final comments to the audience on the Q&A live stream. And like, for Flanagan, this movie was about like the joy of like the joy and finding those things that give you joy. And
Yeah.
and he said, I would have been, he said, I know myself, I would have been the guy to throw $1 in and walk away in
Right.
front of
That's
the
a good
bus
point.
there. And
Right.
he's like, and so I scribbled down, I tried to scribble down his quote. He said, like, whatever you view as joy or whatever creates that just like involuntary joy, try to do that at some point in the next 24 hours, even if it's for 10 minutes. Just give yourself 10 minutes of joy. We all forget that we won't always have the chance to do it. And I feel like that idea and Chuck Krantz as a character is, he's kind of inspirational in that way, just like that because it's like, yeah, that like one day of busking in the second part of this
Right.
is, that is such a great scene on its own. It's like almost uncut. That the girl he dances with, that is Annalise Basso, who plays the young Karen Gillan in Oculus.
Oh, yes. Okay. She did
And
look familiar.
she's also the older sister in Ouija, Origin of Evil.
Okay. Okay.
So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
so now
She's
she's
one of
like,
his.
yeah, so now she's like an adult, a full like 20 something adult. And it's just like, that scene is so well shot. It's so great. The music is fantastic. I looked it up. The drummer goes by the name the Pocket Queen, and she was great in
Nice.
the. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, like just the idea of like, we both have kids, so it's like our kids bring us joy. Like you get to bring Pepper to the movies, and
Yeah.
introduce her to Stand By Me, and Clem's a little bit younger, but you'll get you're probably getting there with her. Me with Charlotte, like we always joke around about like, yeah, I showed her The Exorcist when she was 8 or 9, and I created a monster, and
Right.
but it's like there, I do kind of get the idea that there is a lot of the message of the movie, I feel, resonates with me so much that maybe I did enjoy the movie more than other people did. Just the idea of
Yeah.
like, you never know when this is all going to end. You never know what butterfly effect is going to have on you. And
Right.
so, I'm sitting here, we're recording this in the morning. I still have to go to work and spend 5.5 hours reading essays today, grading Regents exams. So
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to have any joy when I get to work. So like, me getting to like bullshit with you about a movie on YouTube, that brings me a weird level of joy. Tonight I'm gonna go to Coney Island, and it's Friday night fireworks night, and I'm gonna have, my cousin is gonna be there, and Athena and Charlotte are gonna be there, and that's gonna bring me a level of joy. And it's like, yeah, because who knows what could happen tomorrow? Yeah, especially in the world we live in right now. Literally, who knows what the fuck can happen tomorrow?
Yeah. Very good point. No, but like I just kind of want to like take one piece of that, what you just said. I did see it with Pepper, right? And she said that the most interesting part to her, the part that she liked, was the first act where it's the other characters and you don't know what's going on and the world's ending. And she described it as creepy. It felt creepy. And it did feel creepy. However, it's all like tell and not show in that sequence where you do see these advertisements for Chuck And it's weird that you keep seeing these advertisements on the billboard, on TV, and you see stuff like the cable goes out. There's people walking down the street. It kind of reminded me of like The Happening or like War of the Worlds with the Tom Cruise, Steven Spielberg one, where there's just sort of like people in a daze, just kind of walking because the apocalypse is happening. That's effective and good, but there's so many sequences where people are just like, California's gone, and that's the breadbasket, and then this happened in China, and this, and it's like, I understand that it makes sense and it works because that's how we would experience the apocalypse. The apocalypse would be us talking to our neighbors, being like, "Oh my God, the internet is down," versus like a ball of fire crashes in front of us and we're running away, right? And the idea of the apocalypse that they have in this is a very relatable apocalypse because it's just basically like society collapsing. It's not like some kind of supernatural thing where like holes open up in the. I mean, holes do literally open up in the ground. We don't see them, but it's not like like zombies come out or like there's weird demons or anything like that. It just is an apocalypse. Go ahead. What?
I think the worst part of that is that the world is literally ending for in that first sequence, and people are still going to work.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that what's happening right now, though? It's like
Yeah.
I think at one point someone says something like the 4-day war between India and Pakistan. I'm like, wait, wasn't that in the news like 2 weeks ago? But in that sequence, probably the part that was the most exciting to me was when Chittaway Ejiofor and Karen Gillan are sitting in the backyard and they're looking up at the sky, and the sky's all beautiful to begin with, and then all of a sudden the North Star disappears. Then Mars disappears, and there's this like sort of like almost like a light switch going off on like an empty stage. It's just like that was the part that Pepper liked the most too. For me, the part that I enjoyed the most, and this goes back to how I felt about my grandma and her kind of like raising me when I was a kid, is when he dances with his grandma and they're playing Dancing Days or whatever. I think that's the name of the song. Uh, and it's just like a little montage of them dancing. That's action. Like that's something happening. They're dancing. There's a montage. You see it versus them being like, I danced with my grandmother, every Tuesday when I went over there. Or I mean, he lives there, but you get what I'm saying? It's like that's exciting because something's happening, and so much of this. Go ahead.
No, but I and you brought this up earlier. The idea that Flanagan is probably the most accurate interpreter of King's work, and
Right.
I think this story is very tell not show. Like they do have those conversations. Like a lot of that first part, the chapter 3, which is the first chapter in
Right.
the story, is the English teacher having conversations with his neighbors and finding stuff out through those like random conversations. And like they do talk a lot about like how his grandmother and him would dance, and then him and his grandpa would like have long conversations about math and how math is not a bad thing. And it's obviously he becomes a banker and like math is a big part of his life. So
Right.
I don't know. I guess that that didn't bother me as much because I felt like it was just Flanagan adapting the story.
Yeah.
I mean, look, his next projects are Carrie for Amazon, and then there's The Exorcist, which is hovering out there, which I think he said sometime in 2026.
Yeah.
And then there's the ever present looming shadow, literally, of the Dark Tower, which we're hoping we get a great faithful adaptation of. The one thing neither of us brought up that I just want to give a shout out to, and I don't know how you felt about it, but I thought Nick Offerman was so good as the narrator. It's one of my favorite narrator performances ever, maybe
Yeah.
since weirdly Stand By Me, but like even Stand By Me,
Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah.
Stand By Me isn't a constant narration. Like this was like over your shoulder constant narration, and I thought that was a very interesting choice for this type of story where it is so out of order and it's multi-genre and it's very, expository. So I thought it was a unique idea that kind of separated the movie from others. And it's Nick
Mm-hmm.
Offerman. I could listen to Nick Offerman read a phone book, so that was the best part.
Yeah, no, I liked his narration, and there's sequences where like he would say how a character is feeling, then they would like say it, or they would say it like almost like simultaneously. That happens, especially during the dance part. No, it was fun and quirky. He's got a voice tailor made for it. One thing I wanted to bring up before our review ends is, Mike Flanagan always puts his wife into things, and he puts his wife Kate Siegel into like juicy roles. Usually, like they're really important roles. My wife like rolls her eyes when I mention Kate Siegel and Mike Flanagan. She's like, "Oh, of course he would put her in this part, right?" And she's in a very significant part in this movie because she's essentially in a part where she's explaining the concept of the movie to the audience, right? Where like Walt Whitman's poem where he's like, I contain multitudes. I can't remember the fucking name of the poem now as I'm talking about this, but it's like probably his most famous poem because it has that one line that, we contain multitudes. And she has this great moment, Kate Siegel, where she takes young Chuck's head and she's like, "What's in between my hands?" And she's got her hands on both sides of his head, on his ears. Um, and it's so it like summarizes the whole movie. It's like this is the whole movie right here. She's saying it to the audience, right? Um, I like that reference. I like the constant reference to Walt Whitman. I like the reference to Carl Sagan and the like the universal calendar of like where we would be on the calendar and as far as human history compared to the history of the universe. It's great, juicy stuff. Um, but it's like little buoys in an ocean of just sort of like, okay, now here comes this little monologue scene. Here's this scene. Mark Hamill, there's something significant about seeing Mark Hamill give a monologue, and Mark Hamill is like old at this point, right? He's probably like 70 something years old, and um, like Mark Hamill. Obviously, you think Luke Skywalker right away, right? But then he's done some like amazing voice acting, where he's the Joker on Batman the Animated Series. He's Fire Lord Ozai on Avatar. He's a whole bunch of characters, and having him kind of talk about math and how he talks about math can be art, and then he talks about the importance of math in people's lives and like how accounting is actually important. You know, that got me teared up as well. So there's really great moments in this movie. It's just that it's like I feel like there's just kind of too much waiting of like, okay, let's get to this point. Let's get to this point. Like let's find out. Okay, reveal this now. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I I understand all of your criticisms. I understand, like I said, like Athena's. It takes a lot to get Athena out to the movies, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that movie looks really good." And then the movie ended, and I was like, "Wow, that was really good." And she was like, "Yeah, it was good." And then she was like, "You're ready?" And I was like, "Oh, I was gonna like sit through the credits." She's like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "All right, let's go." Like, so it
Yeah.
really, so like,
It's oh, go
it
ahead, go
didn't.
ahead.
I like, I again, I feel like it's definitely a weird. Sometimes, I always, there's gonna be a weird reference, but Jay and
Go
Silent
ahead.
Bob Strike Back. Uh, it has a great line where Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are making fun of each other, and he goes, I think it's Matt Damon. He makes fun of him for doing Forces of Nature, and he goes, "You got to do the studio movie so you can make the art movie." And that line always stuck with me. And having heard Flanagan speak about the movie in the Q&A, I feel that this just was a story that hit him on a personal level, coming like especially when he read it right after the pandemic or right during the pandemic, and I felt that he felt the connection to it, and he wanted to make this movie, and you know, and it's almost as if he made this movie for himself, and if the audience enjoys it, great, but he loved it and it was a personal thing for him, and you know what, he's he's a director now who has over the last 15 plus years contributed so much to the horror world, to pop culture with his Netflix series. I think he earned a shot to just do a project that he was attached to in a very personal way. And I genuinely thought this was an excellent movie. I can definitely see this going on my like top 10 at the end of the year. I definitely want to see it again when it hits streaming and when it's not $20 to rent. I'm probably going to rent it again and watch it again because
Nice.
it's not playing at my like local Regal at all.
Right, right.
But and like I said earlier, I do think this is a movie where you might watch it again in 5 years and you might be like, oh yeah, okay, I like it a lot better this time. Or we might look at it 10 years from now and we might say, oh yeah, this is, this and Dr. Sleep are his, crowning achievements. Like I feel like it could be one of those movies that ages like wine.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Okay. Well, Jesus Christ, I don't know how to follow that up. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm kind of ready for our 28 years later discussion. Another movie you saw with Athena. Um, what do you call it? Do you want to talk about what you have on the channel at the moment?
Yeah. Well, I have a bunch of shorts. Like I said, I just recorded a 25-minute Q&A with Grindhouse horror legend William Lustig. I went to see Maniac at IFC. The IFC Center turned 20 years old this year, and they are commemorating with classic movies. So I saw the 1981 or 1980-81 slasher Maniac. Bill Lustig was there. Great conversation. He has so much personality. And if you want to hear about Joe Spinell, Tom Savini making a movie in New York in the late 70s, how much it used to cost to live in Midtown Manhattan as opposed to what it costs now.
Oh, I'm
It's a
sure.
great listen. I would listen to it. I wouldn't watch it. Me trying to record on my phone for 25 minutes is kind of like you're on the Titanic. But
Oh no.
but the audio should be really good. And that's why I love living in New York. That's why I love the IFC Center. They always do great events like that. So yeah, you can check that out. And now we're gonna go do 28 years later. I just posted a
Yeah.
short. If you want a spoiler-free short review of that, I posted one of those last night.
Nice, man. Yeah, yeah. It's funny because that's why I love living in New York. But I think that the guys from the King cast or the surviving member, they probably did that interview from here though, in the Austin area. The interview with Flanagan that
Probably,
you keep referencing too. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But anyway, yeah. So guys, if you like that review, if you're a fan of Flanagan's, make sure that you subscribe to the Lasser Cast. Danny and I are going to go do our other review. And luckily for everyone, unlike Chuck's world, Pornhub still exists, so we can have some joy later. All right, see y'all. Oh shit! Don't hit cancel recorded after I said that. Okay, hold on.